Communication. Any woman who has been in a relationship knows that communication is one of the most important things in it. In fact, if you don't have communication in your relationship, you don't even have a relationship. But how do you communicate with guys? Men can be so difficult to talk to. Trust me, I know. I'm one of them. I used to be really tough. Anyway, stick with me. That's what we're talking about today. Communication in a relationship. Some tips for reaching your man. And before we roll on with this fantastic video podcast, make sure you do the big three that keeps you in the loop. Number one, like and subscribe. This is great stuff. Why wouldn't you? Number two, turn on the notifications, that little bell indicator next to the subscribe button. And number three, if you got any questions or comments or anything like that, just leave them in the comment section below. Oh, and make sure you stick around to the very bitter end, because right after the credits roll, I've got an extra tip for you. Now, the funny thing is, to men, women actually seem difficult to communicate with. Go figure. Each gender sees the other one as being hard to talk to. How do you communicate and get him to understand you? How do you get your needs met? When you know how to communicate with a guy, you're not only going to be able to make your relationship as strong and as loving as you want, you're also going to find that you can get all of your needs met, and then some. Remember, miscommunication creates distrust and disconnection. Okay, this is why it's so important to work on your communication as much as possible with your guy. It's not just a cliche, okay? It's the most important truth of relationships. So why is communication in a relationship so important? This may qualify as one of the most obvious questions, but you might still need the answer, right? Just a short list of some of the problems you're going to have in your relationship if you don't have good communication. Let's roll through it. You're going to have more fights and arguments, less physical intimacy, more feelings of separation and anxiety, more feelings of emotional disconnection, more heartache and insecurity, more cheating, more breakups, short relationships. It sucks. Look, in fact, if your communication isn't where it needs to be with your peers, the people around you, you could also experience a whole lot of health issues. Communication is so important to your success in life that you should probably be working on it almost every single day of your life. So what is communication in a relationship? Well, my definition of communication is this: the simple skill of expressing your ideas to another person and having that person understand your message and understand you. Now, mind you, simple does not mean easy. In fact, many people find communication to be one of the most challenging things in a relationship. You might agree. In fact, before we get started, let's talk about some of the common communication problems you might not know about. As you may have realized, no one ever sat you down and taught you how to be an amazing communicator, right? You have to want to learn this skill. We're all left to learn it on our own. But when you do gain the skill of communicating with a guy on his level, there's nothing else like it in the world. Your relationship will literally run on autopilot. Mostly, okay? Here's the first problem: not communicating. That might sound obvious, but in truth, most people tend to avoid communicating as much as they can, especially around difficult or uncomfortable topics. Unfortunately, most relationships need to have a lot of conversation, and uncomfortable topics, they're going to come up. There's no escaping it. If you happen to have a relationship with a guy who is already closed off with regard to his emotions, you're going to find it even more difficult. Now, one word of warning here: be careful about expecting your man to be as emotionally communicative as you, okay? It's just not going to happen. He's not going to communicate his emotions as much as you're going to. And if it did happen, if he was that communicative, you'd actually probably get tired of it really quick. It would get a little annoying, because just because men don't communicate as frequently about their emotions doesn't mean that they're emotionally shut down. It also doesn't mean he's emotionally broken, or any number of those labels that a lot of people put on men. Yes, some men don't have any real connection to their emotional intelligence, but these days, a lot of guys do. Men and women have different brains. Contrary to what the media and other people would like to have us believe sometimes, men and women are simply different in many respects. So compared to a woman, a man is always going to seem emotionally shut down, even if he's perfectly fine. So beware about using female standards to evaluate men. It will never help. It's never going to help you. Never, okay? Very often it's actually going to mislead you. Communication problem number two is expecting him to read your mind. Oh boy, you've probably heard this one before and experienced it. This one is very specific to relationships. But it's a well-known joke that women often expect a man to pick up on her emotional state without her having to explain it. Here's where the conflict gets really juicy. If you expect a man to read your mind, you know what you're going to get. You're going to be disappointed every single time. He doesn't want to read your mind because he's already afraid of making a mistake when you're in a bad emotional state. So he'll just stay quiet. It's safer for him. And I think, he's probably right about that, right? You may want him to pick up on your emotions and get you in some mystical way, but not only is this unrealistic, it will probably drive most men away from you. Many times a woman will resist expressing her emotions to a guy because she's afraid of scaring him off. Now the key here is to find a way to explain your emotional state to a guy that will make him feel like he is not the one to blame. And yes, even if he is the one to blame. Communication problem number 3 is worrying about going deep. Many people that are in a relationship worry about talking about the deep stuff, the heavy emotions. Yes, even women do sometimes. They're worried about talking about them, and that talking about them is going to make those problems even worse. In reality, the reason that we're afraid about talking about the deep stuff is that we don't do it enough to build up some confidence that we can do it. And the couples that know how to talk about the deep stuff actually do much, much better. They have fewer arguments. They have much more connection than other couples do. And the more you learn how to work through that tough stuff, the more confidence you're going to get. It's like a feedback cycle that makes your relationship win. Communication problem number 4 is needing to be right. This one comes up when you feel misunderstood, right? You have to be heard, and you feel misunderstood because you're not communicating that much along the way. It also comes up, again, when you're not feeling heard by him, because you try to communicate to him, you don't feel like you get your point across, and then his behavior doesn't change, so then you feel stuck and you get frustrated, and this goes on and on and on. Now, whatever the reason, we have to let go of the need to be right when we communicate in difficult conversations. As the saying goes, we have to be able to see things from the other person's perspective. Or as Stephen Covey once said, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Now, I've got a couple more of those problems. If you want to find them out, go look at the article. Go to datingfire.com. You go straight to the blog, and you can check out this article there. Just don't have the space to cover every little bit today because I want to move on to relationship tip number 1, focusing on improvement. No one goes from 0 to hero with their communication overnight. It's just unrealistic to expect this. So what you have to do is focus on getting a little bit better every single day. That is your goal. If you have that for your goal, you're going to have massive improvement in no time. On 1% improvement per day, that would mean that your relationship would get 100% better in just 3 months or so. That's pretty good. I mean, imagine what kind of connection you would have, the love connection you would have after a year or two of improving, and now that you have an understanding of the importance. All right, relationship tip number 2 this is communication tip number 2, notice your communication landmines. We all have certain areas of communication that trigger us more than others. If you know what these landmines are, why not stop yourself from losing control when they show up? Instead of blowing yourself up in an argument, be on the lookout for when you start to react from fear or jealousy or insecurity or any other negative emotion that comes up. Because those areas are where you're activated, and you're going to lose emotional control, and that's going to cause the most harm in your relationship. Just notice whenever you feel the most emotional reaction instead of rational thinking when you're communicating. This is going to point you towards your sensitive zones. And if you know these already, why not share them with your guy so he's aware and he can help manage them in your communication? That's a big tip right there. All right, communication tip or relationship communication tip number 3 is to understand him. If I were to tell you one thing that would make the most significant change in the quality of your relationship, it would probably be to focus on understanding him first. Remember that Stephen Covey quote I gave you just a few minutes ago? When you understand how men think in general, and then how he thinks in specific, you're going to be miles ahead of any other woman at keeping his love. Men, that's one of the things we anchor to more than anything else, is a woman that we think gets us. When she gets us on that level, we know she's unique and special, and we're not going to walk away from that. The more he feels like you get him and understand him, the more he's going to devote himself to you. It's that simple. And when he feels understood, watch out. That's when he's going to surprise you by making a long-term commitment to you. In fact, he won't see it as a commitment. He'll see it as him needing you to make that commitment to him. All right, relationship tip for communication number 4 is just ask him. Just start asking him some questions. Here's some that you can use. What things cause conflict between us? Do you feel heard by me? What things cause you disappointment and pain in our relationship? What things make you feel happy and connected? What things don't you want to talk about with me? What stops you from talking about them? How would you like us to communicate differently? Now, those questions right there will unlock the doors of communication with him. And I know, trust me, you probably heard those questions and thought, oh my God, how can I possibly ask him those? That's probably the main problem in your relationship, is that you're not asking those questions out of fear, anxiety, or uncertainty about what will happen to your relationship. Trust me on this. This is the most important thing to get past. If you give him the space to express himself without judgment, you're going to be amazed at what he reveals to you. Just take a moment and think about the last time you asked him a really sincere question about his experience, about what he was feeling in the relationship, and then you spent at least 5 minutes just listening to what he had to say. Look, don't feel bad. Most women never do this. Even when they feel like they're giving him their sincere interest and they're communicating, what they discover is they were actually just waiting to tell him their own experience. Don't be that woman. Be the one that really sincerely listens deep. And you know what? Next tip is, if you're stuck, get some help. Sometimes your communication patterns get so deep that you can't get out of them. And if you notice this pattern coming up where you just can't stop getting into arguments, you might need some form of mediation. You might need help. You might need a coach. You might need a counselor or a therapist to help you start working on your communication issues. I've done this work with many women, and if you're interested in my coaching, by all means, go check it out. That's at the site. Because if you can't break free of your dysfunctional patterns, they will probably, well, no probably about it, they will eventually destroy your relationship. Next tip is find out what his code is. In my connection code program, I explain all the details about the different communication types that men have. It's communication and connection. It's how we connect with women. Now, there isn't enough space here for me to explain all of them, but suffice to say that men do fall into distinctly different communication types. There's groups they fall into. And if you don't know what his particular type is, it's going to be really easy for you to misunderstand or misread him. At the very least, you should explore your communication styles. If you're the kind of person that has a hard time with criticism, for example, then you want your partner to know that, right? So he's going to know to be careful about expressing criticism and how he does it. He'll have to be a little bit more delicate with his footwork. Simply explaining these differences in communication up front, that's going to resolve countless problems later on. As a quick experiment, just ask your man what his top 3 needs are in your relationship the next time you talk to him. What? You say you've never asked him that before? Then get out your pencil and start taking notes after you do ask him. And yes, you do have the right to tell him your needs right after. I'm saying that you want to start by listening to him first. Now, there's nothing more important to communicating in a relationship than your man feeling safe with you, okay? There's nothing more important than that. Now, what is safe and why does he need to feel it? Well, for him, he needs to feel safe because he has to feel like you're not going to berate him. He has to feel like you're not going to shut him out from physical intimacy. He has to feel like you're never going to judge him. He doesn't want to feel like you're going to stop respecting him or ever belittle him as a man or emasculate him. There are more nuances and details to it than that, but this is the bulk of it. When a man feels safe in a relationship, he will stay with you forever, really. Now, I'm going to tell you the most important communication skill in a relationship. The most important communication skill is also the easiest. In fact, it's probably the one that you never really even thought about much. In fact, most women never realize how easy communication is until you master this simple trick. So you're wondering what it is, right? Well, I'm not going to keep you in suspense any longer. But when you hear it, you might not realize just how important it really is. All right, here it is. The most important communication skill you can have in your relationship is listening. Not just any listening, mind you. This is the kind of listening that a woman gives when she understands a man and his experience. And I'm going to tell you right now, 95% of women don't really understand a man's experience. That's why you're here. That's why you're listening to me talk and gab about this stuff. Yes, 95% of men also struggle understanding women. But for now, it's far easier to get you educated than it is to change all the other guys. So let's work with you right now. In order to listen to him and hear what he has to say, you've also got to get to know what it is he's actually talking about. Let's face it, men don't have very sophisticated emotional vocabularies. Talking about his feelings is pretty foreign to him. If you're gonna reach him, you're gonna have to talk to him. You're gonna have to know how to talk to him. What words, what phrases work. And there are shortcuts. There's tricks, and all kinds of tricks actually, for getting through to him and communicating your needs in the relationship. The most important tip here is knowing the password to his heart. Just like logging into a computer or your social media account, when you know the password to his heart, to his mind, he's no longer going to be a mystery to you. You'll understand him. You'll have all the access to his love that you need. There are words that men will listen to. There are things you can say to him that will open his heart. Now, I'm sure you want to know what those are. Go on over and find out. Just go on over to the link you see below me here, datingfire.com/forever. That's datingfire.com/forever. Take a few seconds, watch that video. It's going to be an eye-opener for most women out there, including you. Hey, stick around for just a few more seconds because we're right after the credits roll. I got another tip for you. And before you leave, do the big three. Number one, make sure you like and subscribe. This is good stuff. I know you want to get more. Turn on the notifications, that little bell symbol next to the subscribe button. And of course, down in the comment section, let me know what questions you've got or what videos you'd like to see. Hey, this is Cavallo from datingfire.com and datingadviceguru.com. As always, it's great to talk to you. And as always, live and love with passion. I want to point out another one of those communication problems because this one's big. This problem can happen with both men and women, but it happens much sooner and more noticeable with men. When a man is forced to communicate about his emotions for too long, he will eventually become flooded. This means that he's overwhelmed by the emotional content. It's like it was hit by a flash flood. If you've ever noticed that your emotional conversations go on for longer than like 15 or 20 minutes, it's very, very likely that you flooded him, and he probably shut down. He'll just stop talking, he'll go blank, he'll just start to stonewall and put up a shield. You might have experienced this one, yeah? And this will probably frustrate you even more. There comes a point in the conversation where he just stops communicating and he wants to escape. The secret to avoiding this is very simple. Stop the discussion and take a break after about 15 minutes, and every 15 minutes if you have to. If your emotional conversation goes on for longer than an hour, you're never going to reach him, trust me. So another reason you got to find out how to make him yours forever.